Hey everyone, and welcome to everybody's favorite show, Save That Pig! Hungover Gaming's #1 TV show where we send someone in to delve into the far depths of the Carolina pig farm, select 4 pigs, and we put their pictures up for your voting pleasure. So if you're joining us on Twitch, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, on Google Play, you can also join in to our game show, Save That Pig. Yes, that's right. You get to choose your top 4, your favorite out of the top 4, your favorite pig, and we'll do everything in our power to save pigs. That pig. So, welcome to Hungover Podcast. Save That Pig is our opening segment, as always.
Yeah.
Julien, which pig are you gonna save?
I can't see the pigs. I don't know which pig to save, but I'm gonna pick the middle pig because that's my favorite pig.
All right. Well,
are they?
The game is lost. Nobody can see the pigs. Julien messed up on a technological end. I'm gonna blame him for that.
Fine with me. Look, Ivan. Thank you so much for giving us that intro. That was really something stellar, out of left field. You're always keeping me on my toes. That's why we keep you around. I literally
delayed the start of this podcast so that I could go into my editing program and A, record me saying "Save that pig," and then B, edit the audio so it was a chorus of me saying "Save that pig" at different pitches with reverb.
You are something else. A piece of work. Vaughn, thank you so much again for that intro. But I gotta tell you, the people, if you are interested in this podcast, maybe you just saw it for the first time and Save That Pig really got you going. You can go ahead and get this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and on YouTube in video form, but you can also catch it live on twitch.tv/jujubsgood or auto-hosted by Ivan himself, twitch.tv/comradeboyar. That is what I'm talking about. Multimedia, multi-people. We've got 2 people, and it is a really great podcast that you can also review on iTunes. But Ivan, enough of that nonsense. Who wants to hear that? That's not what they're here for. They're here for us.
No, they're here to play Save That Pig.
Save that pig, Keep it going in the comment section below. Or save the pig now. It's up to you. The pig's life is in your hands. But we started our podcast.
I made one joke, and that's my joke for the rest of the show,
Julien. Well, we brought how many? What's the rule of comedy is 3s, right? So we brought it up in the beginning. We'll randomly bring it up in the middle. And then hopefully we can get a Save That Pig outro for all the comedic gold that Hungover Gaming provides. Now, Ivan, we start our podcast out every single week by asking each other,
which pig
will
would
you save the pig, or will you tell me about what media you've been consuming, and also what did you drink last night?
Well, so yesterday was Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. So it was really a Mother's Day weekend, which is why we didn't record the podcast yesterday.
Because we both love our moms so much. No.
And we loved our moms.
We love our mommies, and we had to spend all day with them, okay? That's just how it is. Sorry.
That's true. I did literally spend all day with my mother.
Yeah, which is great.
Started with some Eggs Benny in the morning.
Very nice of you.
A classic Mother's Day dish. Then...
Only if Mom doesn't have to make it, which is
that's
great.
True. Mom shouldn't have to lift a finger. In general, it was a pretty good day. We had some khvachkara, which is a Georgian table red. It's supposedly semi-sweet.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like cherry juice with a little bit of alcohol in there.
Oh, okay.
So the way that Georgian wine is supposed to be... You're supposed to be able to have a lot of it over the course of a long meal, just sitting down and being together. Whereas Russians just have vodka over the course of the meal.
And the same volume of vodka they would have. So.
Yes. The Georgian tradition is just have this wine. And it's pretty sweet, but it's a nice introductory wine, or it's a nice kind of dessert wine, actually, because of that sweetness, because it's very juice-like oriented.
Nice.
And so I had a bit of that. I'm drinking currently a Malbec.
Very nice.
A 2014 Columbia Valley Malbec, which is okay, pretty decent, not bad. Got a solid donation to the alcohol chest by Laura's grandma, so just dipping into that.
Very nice.
And Laura doesn't like Malbec, and we had dinosaur barbecue for dinner, so paired
That's
the
perfect
wine with
the Malbec.
the meal. Yep.
I'll tell you, anything, a nice greasy cheeseburger with a Malbec.
I'll tell you what, I'm saying Malbec, I meant Merlot.
Both of those I could see going well with some nice barbecue. So at least it wasn't like the stark difference between a Pinot Grigio and some other red wine.
I refuse to drink Pinot Grigio. This week in media, I consumed Leviathan.
Leviathan?
So this week, May 9th is...
Movie?
No, it's a movie. It's a Russian movie.
Oh, okay.
So May 9th is, of course, as everybody knows, Victory Day.
Yes.
The day in which the USSR defeated the Nazi Empire.
I believe it.
With little to no help from anybody else.
V-Day. I mean, you're acting like I was in World War II. I couldn't care less who helped out who. We won. We all won, all right? Mostly the Russians won. Okay.
Won. 85% of Germans killed during World War II in combat, killed by the USSR, but we'll move on.
Credit for World War II.
So in honor of that this week, I started watching more Russian movies, and
That's
one
cool.
of them being Leviathan. Leviathan was I think 2013 Russian movie made about, it's kind of a slightly metaphorical tale about modern Russia in terms of governance and God and living in a post-Soviet Russia after the crisis of the 90s is over. We're living in an age that is supposed to be supportive of most to all people, but the governance is still one that rules unfairly and arbitrarily. And has the ability to take what it wants and do what it wants, according to the description of this movie.
Okay.
So there is a moment so the main driving, inciting conflict is so the main character Kolya and his family have lived in a house that he built himself in this small northern Russian rural town. And the government is attempting to seize it. The mayor or the governor of the region is attempting to seize the territory upon which this house was built to build his own palace. And so there is a long drawn-out court battle, which involves Kolya's family friend, who he served in the military with, who is now a big-shot lawyer from Moscow. Mm-hmm. And... the idea is that they can't save the house, but at least they can get, blood money from the governor through the blackmail and bribery that can happen to a person in such a position of power. And then many things happen that are sad and depressing because it is a gloomy look at modern Russia. Oh. A film that I had to watch in 2 sittings. It is... very tough to handle. There are some moments of levity, but overall I would say this is a movie that really should have been seen in theaters, but also would have been great to see in theaters over the course of multiple days, just because it's very heavy. It's like eating the most heavy meal possible. You feel very fulfilled while watching it, but you also want to throw up from how much food is in your stomach. It's really intense.
Does it take place over? I'm sorry if you already said it, but does it take place over a long period of time?
It's like a week, which is really depressing. Okay, it's a very short. It's like a month to a week. It's a very short amount of time.
And it's in one place in Russia.
Yeah, basically involves this small region in northern rural Russia along the coast.
Okay, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a really powerful movie. I highly recommend it. You can find it with subtitles. Yeah, go check it out.
Nice.
What'd you check out this week, Julian?
Vaughn, let me tell you, I've been delving into Dragon Ball Z. You know, I got my girlfriend hooked on Dragon Ball Super, and so now we're going back into Dragon Ball Z, and then we're gonna go into Dragon Ball, I guess. We're going in reverse chronological order, just so we could see Goku turn into a kid again. Instead of just watching Dragon Ball GT, we're going to just go in reverse chronological order.
That's a solid order.
Yeah, but it's we're watching the English dub, even though Dragon Ball Super is not dubbed, so it's an interesting contrast. But honestly, I think Dragon Ball Z is probably the show that had one of the best English dubbings ever in anime, I think. And you honestly you wouldn't have fan expos where the English voice actors go to and are revered by fans as opposed to the Japanese voice actors. You wouldn't have that happening if people didn't like it so much, as generally people don't, the anime purists don't really like English dubbing, even though they're from America. But it's because they put a lot of effort into the dubbing, so it works out pretty well. I also managed to listen to a podcast that I've told you about in the past called Talking Tunes by Rob Paulson. Rob Paulson is the voice of
he's
Pinky.
The voice actor. Yeah.
He's the voice actor of Pinky, Carl from Jimmy Neutron. He's one of the Ninja Turtles. He's been on G.I. Joe, I think, maybe. But he's done a lot of other things, obviously, as well. And he got Sean Schimmel, which is the voice of Goku and King Kai, on the show as well. So I listened to that episode. It's really good, actually. And now he's started at the end of the episode of his podcast episodes. He'll with his voice actor guest, he'll have both of them read a little dialogue in a voice of their choice, so it's actually really entertaining.
That's pretty cool.
I think it's worth listening to and subscribing to if anyone is out there as an aspiring voice actor or actor in general. I think it's a really cool show. Or if you just want to learn more, like me, about voice actors and the cartoons and things like that, and anime, obviously. But yeah, so I listened to that. And I've been playing some Yakuza. No new games came out, so I've just been trying to chip away at the games that I have currently. Oh, well, I guess Destiny 2 Warmind came out. Shit.
I actually need to explore that. I haven't played it at all.
You have the expansion pass?
I'm pretty sure. I know I have it for PS4. I'm pretty sure I also got it for PC.
Okay, cool. Look.
We'll see.
I'll tell you. I think it's worth going back into if you initially liked Destiny 2, which you did, right? I mean, you liked it. It's a fun game. I think Destiny 2 is a fun game to play. But when it comes to a game that you want to sink countless hours into, because, you really enjoy it and you want it to be your hobby and you want to get good at the game and get all the gear, then this game doesn't end up having very long legs. So that's where it ends up, because you don't want to you don't have the drive to collect everything in the game, because everything's sort of flatlined and pretty obtainable, one, and two, there's no real point in getting half of the guns out there, let's say. There are a few good guns that I would say it's worth getting, but honestly, any of the legendary guns, the purple guns, I don't know why they switch legendary as opposed to Blizzard. Legendary is like the yellow, or the most they're the best ones, right? The rarest, sorry. And it's funny, they're owned by Blizzard now too. But yeah, so I mean, the legendary guns is just like they're all the same gun. So I don't know. And then gear, all the armor pieces are all the same. pretty much. They're just aesthetic, and they level up your power level. But then again, power level is not really relevant at all anyways, so I don't really understand the mentality. It seemed to me when they were developing the game, which may have gone through multiple stages of development and restarting, it seems to me that they were going straight for they wanted to expand their player base from just the hardcore people coming from Destiny over to the more casual players. Yeah. And it sort of backfired on them because now they have all these systems in place, and it's not really it's not catering towards anyone. Is the situation.
You try that middle ground and
you
can't
they can't,
you don't excel anywhere. It's like me playing Overwatch.
Exactly. It's like you're trying
everything, but at least I could play something in everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I played that, and then I drank a Modelo. That was pretty fun. And
Modelos are pretty delicious.
Modelo is a really solid beer, and it's really good for the summertime. I'll tell you that much.
Yes, some shrimp, some Modelo.
Yeah,
you can't go wrong.
I definitely. It's a good light beer. Lighter beer. Sorry, it's not a light beer. But yeah, Vaughn, that's about it for me, I guess. What else did I do? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I've got nothing else interesting to say.
Okay.
Yeah. But Vaughn, I had a topic that was inspired by one of my a YouTuber that I watch. His name is Omni. He is a Smash player. And or he was a Smash player. He's actually an accountant by day, and then he's a YouTuber by night. And he was a Smash player. Then he started making YouTube videos. He has about 50,000 subscribers right now. Omni, OMNI. And he's sort of he makes, I guess, sort of vlogs where he just talks to the camera. But I mean, they're well edited and things like that. And he also does Let's Plays and things like that as well. But he made a video, which is pretty much the topic of the show, I think, about what classes he thinks all people in America should have to take, I think, when they're going to high school or for something like that, for instance. So I thought that we would talk about that. And you being a substitute teacher right now, I think you interact way more with the youth of America than most people might not even know about. So I don't know.
That was a sentence.
I don't know. I tried.
Apparently,
to say
we need more grammar.
Yeah,
or
I know exactly.
We should just teach an entire course in how to transition from one subject
of a podcast
because
podcasts are way more important.
We call it Segway School. Spelled Segway instead of how you actually spell
There's a
Segway,
Q in there,
which is Segue, Segway, something like that. Anyway, yeah, so I do spend a lot of time in classrooms these days. I teach in all levels of school, so elementary through high school. I've taught in a variety of classrooms. Or attempted to teach. Yeah. As it were, substitutes don't really get a lot of respect all the time, so we try our best, but who knows what's going to happen.
You guys are the glue holding everything together, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, we try to make things run and earn a buck while doing it. I wouldn't call us the glue, but we're definitely
That's
sticky.
What the teachers
So in terms of what's taught in America, so it's an interesting blend across the United States of what the course curriculum should be. So America is a country in which every single city and state and region, it's the boards of education are the ones who technically determine what should be taught throughout the school district and then the state. So there's a state set curriculum. There's also more localized curriculum that can be set. There is a national kind of Department of Education, but the Department of Education has ironically the least amount of control over what individual schools are teaching. So the way it's structured is probably the more local you get, the more kind of power you have over like purchasing textbooks and different things. But states set curriculum, and a lot of states set that curriculum now based on what was a national directive, which was the Common Core, part of Obama's Race to the Top. So we transitioned from George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind to Obama's Race to the Top.
Yeah.
And part of that was having the Common Core. So there is a common set of standards that should be taught across the U.S. There are several states, including Texas, a state in which I taught for 2 years, which are not part of Common Core. And we've seen actually more states who were part of Common Core withdraw from being in Common Core than states coming into Common Core again. Why did states join Common Core then to begin with? Funding bonuses. So if you adhere to the Common Core standards, you got federal money coming into your education systems. As we all know, in America also, education is funded by local property taxes. So for instance, in Syracuse, if we take the Syracuse City School District, it's funded by property tax. Now, what is the largest business in Syracuse? Syracuse University.
I thought it was the salt mines. Just
something
a joke.
Like that. One of the biggest is at least Syracuse University. Syracuse University is a non-for-profit institution. So let's say Syracuse University buys up a whole bunch of property. They're not paying the same style of property tax or property tax in general because they're a non-for-profit educational institution that other places are. So it actually causes a drain on the available tax pool for things like the Syracuse City School District. Now, SU did do one giant check for several $1 million to SCSD recently, but in general, that's not the same as being able to be consistently funded at a standard rate. So that is kind of the big problem with this place, and in general, a lot of places, is that funding is so different per school district. And so when you get into a classroom, even if you're working with certain amount of students and there's a lot of money being poured into a school, it might not be poured into exactly what you think. But we do get some interesting programs, like in the schools that I work with. You would think that there's not a lot of technology, but almost every single student that I work with has contact with some level of computer work or something like that from elementary onwards. So they're doing a lot of their like English and math work actually on computers.
So they're just typing
with specialized. Yeah, so with specialized design programs. So either they're typing or more likely they're practicing their grammar or their reading rules or things like that, or reading in general. Books are being read to them, so they should follow along with the text so that they are developing more reading skills through a personalized program that assesses their skills on an individual basis through an algorithm of test taking that they do, plus their daily coursework in reading and in math. So in general, I think that there's a lot of progress that's being done. A lot of the things that we think that should be taught in schools are actually being taught. But that's great. I think the thing that's more important is actually, is it being reinforced outside of the classroom? Are students reading enough outside of the classroom? Is there like curiosity being developed, etc.? I think it's much more difficult to teach curiosity than it is to teach certain subjects. That all being said, there are life skills that everyone needs to have, and you, Julien, I know you have certain life skills that you think need to be taught to every child.
Personally, I have a couple, but then again, I haven't been in school since I was in school, right? So, I mean, I'm a professional student, let's be honest. I've been a student since I was 5, so, or maybe younger. When do you start school now? 4?
Ooh,
some students start 4. Anyways, but yeah, like I said, you can correct me if I am wrong in suggesting a class that is currently being taught. But then again, you don't know about every school, I'm guessing, so I would assume...
Exactly. It can be so
you
individualized based on that what I was going through with in terms of boards of education, with textbooks they use, for instance, what coursework is demanded. For instance, the high school I went to was was an academic magnet school where AP Literature was a mandated class. Every student was required to take AP Lit.
Right, but
instance.
some students are obviously not as privileged, and so on and so forth. Some students are more privileged, so it's a mixed bag in America. But that's what you get when you have 300 million people in a country, right? It's very difficult to, I think, or at least with our current educational system, to educate all of us, right? So, and obviously there are other factors that go into that, which are not, we don't have to discuss them today. But I think personally, I guess we'll get started here. I think that a really good sense of money management should be taught to students that are just coming into. So, for instance, in high school, I think when you're 16 or 17, if your parents haven't already taught you this sort of thing, I mean, I know my parents taught me how to manage money. I should never spend more money than I have, etc. Things like that. But I don't think half of the people in this country know how to manage money very well, right? So I think that just having a general course in having a line of credit, owning a bank account. What does it mean to own a bank account? What does it mean to have a line of credit? What does it mean to take out a loan? Why would you ever want to take out a loan? Things like that. So I guess a general accounting course would be pretty practical and very useful for students coming out of high school. I mean, you don't obviously have to go to college in this country, but a lot of people go to college to become accountants, and they study accounting in college by choice. But I think that a strong accounting core can really help you out when making decisions when it comes to money, personally. I don't know if you agree, but that's, I think that's something that I wasn't really taught at all. Luckily, my parents were smart enough to tell me to, they helped me open up my first bank account, checking account with Chase, and I have a line of credit with them as well. So they like forced me to get a line of credit, and they said, you don't, as long as you just pay off your card, it doesn't really matter how you use it. It's just as long as you're on top of your game here. So, but a lot of people obviously, when they get out of college or when they get out of high school, they'll open a line of credit with no knowledge and no knowledge of interest that credit cards could charge you, right? I mean, there are a lot of credit cards that are advertised to you as very valuable and very easy to get, but they don't tell you all these hidden fees that you may end up having to pay, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't really pay attention to, and then they get in debt. So, and then how do you? I think a good is okay. So I think a course. I mean, again, I'm not a teacher or anything, so I can't write a curriculum. But I was thinking about it, and it made sense to me that this is just a core life skill that everyone has to manage well if they want to be financially sound and, honestly, I think successful. A lot of the most successful people in the world right now are people who, at least on some level, know how to manage money. So they're certainly the most rich people. And so I think, I mean, it's one of the most important things in your life that you come across every day is your money. So, and knowing how to protect it and what it is and where it should go is something that I think that we should be teaching. But
yeah, it also requires a lot of forethought in general. So a lot of what students are lacking is an ability to develop a process of thinking beyond in long-term thoughts. Often that can be at the younger ages, like within the course of a day or a week, and at middle school level, it's like they can't even think of how their grade would be affected within a quarter of the school year, let alone the year. But as you get older, when you get to, so the reason that like elementary is not considered the hardest group to teach. The hardest group to teach is considered to be middle school.
Yeah.
Why?
Definitely.
Because the hormones are flying everywhere. There's like physiology that is determining a lot of acting, and little consequences thought of, especially with boys at that age. Once you reach high school, you can see an end goal. There's a reason for graduating. Like, your grades matter. Your days present matter. You can be fined. Money you can be fined for missing days, for instance. So there are like hardcore consequences that happen in high school that don't happen anywhere else. So even if you have those physiological hormones that are bouncing around, there are hardcore consequences that students are more likely to grasp, especially since they're a little bit further on the developmental stage. Middle school, they don't physiologically grasp consequences at a long-term basis. So even teaching them like money management skills or something like that at that level isn't going to be as beneficial as having that foundation later on, like you were saying, in high school. But in general, the more you can build up this idea of the longer term you think about certain things, right? So you don't have to think long term about like chewing the piece of gum that you're chewing. But if you have to think about money management, course credit, things like that over a longer term, you're helping them build a skill set and a logic set. So a lot of the times when students move from high school to college, they get very, very lost. Having also been a TA at the university level, you see freshman students get very flustered about course scheduling, how to produce proper work for a university level class, how to maintain a reading schedule, things like that, right? So if you develop planning skills, logic, being able to
time management,
logic your way through a system of problems, right? And some sort of scale of time so that you can build a time management system, you're developing skills that they can apply to multiple problem sets that are put in front of them. And especially with money. So if we're talking about money, you have things not just like developing a line of credit or things like that, but you have the idea of what is a housing loan that has an interest rate that can explode, right? So that floating interest rate, what is that? Payday loans that can range from like 300 to 3,000% APR on those kinds of loans. Yeah. So you're getting a $100 loan right now, so in 14 days you have to pay that loan back plus an exorbitant percentage on that loan. Since they're smaller amounts of money, technically, they should be, their percentages will skyrocket based on how much you have to pay back. So understanding that system of percentages, how charges and fees apply, are not only to like credit cards, but smaller scale things like having to have a loan from paycheck to paycheck or in between paychecks. And how do you combat the need of that? Well, you have a small like rainy day thing. So again, accounting or some level of personal money management is an important aspect to have. In addition to that, I would say that it needs to be reinforced, like
anything.
The idea of wealth and how wealth is created. Right. So you need to invest in assets that will appreciate over time. Yeah. So a car is not an appreciating asset. It is always depreciating.
Unless it's like a vintage car that you never drive, and then
yeah, but that's a luxury item. That's a different thing completely. I know. So like understanding the necessity of building positive assets in your portfolio over the course of time, and like renting all the time isn't great, and understanding the difference that you can basically pay close to the same amount in rent with a mortgage if your credit is good enough. How do you build that credit line, things like that?
Right. My dad, for instance, he's coming to he has some property. I wouldn't say a lot. Actually, there's only one property left that he owns up in upstate New York, and he's had these tenants that are renting from him for I think 30 years. So they've been renting the place for 30 years, and he's offered to just sell it to them plenty of times. So, I mean, just if you look at the amount of money they've spent in rent over the course of those 30 years, you would come to the conclusion that they could have bought this house many times over. And I realize, obviously, people live paycheck to paycheck. I understand that. But that's where this class couldn't, for instance, come in handy. You know, how to save money, how to manage your money, etc.
And also what benefits exist for like first-time home buyers or things like that. There are certain types of tax credits that you can have, or abilities to manage what that payment is going to be. A lot of the times, the most difficult thing of buying homes is that down payment and things like that. But it would also help understanding when people who make $25,000 a year are buying a $300,000 home, and then down the line we'll have it foreclosed on. Those are those subprime mortgage loans that were the reason that the 2007 crash happened, right? We were just giving loans to anybody. If we had accounting courses or courses of personal finance, then those people would be less likely to purchase a home that they couldn't afford. But Wall Street wouldn't be able to make as much money as they did. Again, remember, nobody from Wall Street went to jail over these subprime mortgage loans, except for a small Chinese bank. But none of the major Wall Street companies ever really dealt with anything. So you had people who made tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of money and really suffered no consequences, whereas other people the poor people who were investing in these homes had them taken away for nothing, right? So if you had some level of better personal finance, then you could have some way of addressing that imbalance in knowledge and things like that. Just the same way that you need you need to address the imbalance of knowledge in terms of nutrition and things like that. So not just calories, but also knowing like salt intake and different things.
High blood pressure.
If we're talking about African American populations who have a significantly higher rate of heart disease and high blood pressure, things like that, associated risks of a diet which has too much salt intake, for instance. Now, is there a huge difference between the physiology of an African American person and a white person? No. But we need to look as a whole at the ingredients that are involved in the cooking, at the food deserts which we have created over time through the inability of grocery stores, etc., to focus on community health over profit. So profit is the main focus. So if you have some stores in lower income households that don't generate the same profit as it would if it was in a suburb or some other area, then they remove them. You create food deserts, which the only place you can go shop for groceries is at a bodega. What are you buying at a bodega? Is it the
Chips.
best grocery, the best produce? No. Is it a large selection of produce? No. Is it a large selection of junk foods, salty foods, processed foods, which all contain lots of salt and other preservatives to make sure that they can stay on the shelves longer? Yes. So there's some level of understanding nutrition and the deficit of some diets based on that nutrition and why it exists. Again, the same way that I would say that wealth in this country is an important tool of understanding, like, if you are in a poor black neighborhood that has been historically subjugated, you need to understand why it's maintained itself as a poor black neighborhood. Understand the policies of redlining and things like that. These are the ways to build a civic knowledge within a community, and also an understanding of why you need to address certain practices of holding money, buying food, things like that, which can over time affect the status of a neighborhood.
Right. And I mean, I don't know if you were implying that we should teach nutrition in school, but I think that's another valuable course to be teaching.
I know that like health and nutrition is taught, but I think
not
greater value over
right.
the course of an entire student's history of being in there would be better. And then encouraging students to have conversations with their parents over different things. Like, for instance, I was in a class where a student was eating French onion dip with pretzels.
Sweet. That sounds awesome.
I was like, yo, have you looked at that French onion dip? Let me take a look. And so he's like, it's only this many calories. So he had the concept of calorie intake there. So I was like, okay. And then I look at it, and then I see it's like 11% of sodium per serving. And then I look at the serving size and that, and I'm like,
teaspoon.
do the math here. And he's like, oh my God, am I going to die? I'm like, no, you're not going to die. But you need to know that you need to manage your sodium intake and other things other than just calories.
And
especially since he's an aspiring boxer.
Oh, boy. So. That's hilarious. But, I mean, well, at least you taught him a lesson there. But,
yeah, he immediately went to throw everything away.
But like you said, reinforcement outside of the classroom is really important. So he might have, thought of that because of you that one time. But if it's not, constantly being drilled into your consciousness and things like that, then you're really going to, forget eventually. So he might end up getting that French onion dip again. I love French onion dip, but you can't obviously have it every day.
Or eat an entire can in one sitting. Is what this kid was ready to do.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, right.
Every diet obviously needs a balance.
Yes.
There's obviously a motorcycle out here, and it has to be a balance of everything. So the schools which are offering foods to the students have to also look at the food that they're serving. Like Jamie Oliver had this big campaign with UK schools. But at the same time, in the U.S., like we look at prison system food, we look at vegetable. School food. It all tends to be really cheap, processed food that is just the cheapest thing to supply. And we keep talking about kids are our future. We need to look out for them. But are we really doing that if we're feeding them and encouraging like these super bad habits of nutrition over the course of their students' lives? Like, I don't think it's an appropriate thing to do.
Right, and I don't know if there's any teachers or school or educators listening out there, but I don't think we necessarily mean to imply that it's the school's fault. Obviously, this is I believe the schools would provide a better lunch if they were funded better. So I don't think it's necessarily the school's fault on that level. For instance,
I think it's absolutely a political problem.
Yeah.
I think that it over the course of the past, especially 10 years, local governments have become far more conservative, as that's what the like Koch brothers were funding and things like that. Overwhelmingly conservative districts cut down on education, and the repercussions of the 2007 financial crisis have been to cut down services as much as possible. So you're paring down education expenses as much as possible. And so what is going to be sacrificed? The quality of food, the quality of textbooks, the quality of other instruments. So that you're also cutting out things like music education, art education, a diversity of courses that could be taught to enrich students' lives are either tossed by the wayside or considered unimportant. So what are you teaching to the students? If over the course of the students' lives they hear, oh, art is in jeopardy, music is in jeopardy, what is that signaling to students? Those courses are unimportant. So when we're like debating whether or not to have them, is because they don't really matter to a student. And what does that tell the students who have to go to those classes? Well, maybe I don't have to pay attention so much to the teacher. Maybe I don't have to invest at all or engage with the material. So you're not developing or exploring various parts of the brain. You're not really engaging it. What is it that everybody has been the aspiration of everybody is that Renaissance man, that Renaissance woman, so exceeding just one knowledge base. It's the most well-rounded students, right, that we're searching for. But how can we build a well-rounded student if we're cutting out every other part of the curriculum other than math, science, and reading?
Right.
And we're cutting down on science, by the way.
It's, don't get me started on that. But it's, and I think I would like to talk a little bit about math, but you're right, absolutely. And when we cut down on art and music and even physical education, which I can't believe that these kids have so much pent-up energy, you gotta at least let them bounce off the walls. You don't have to give them like a crazy organized sport or something. Just let them run into the wall or something. But I'm kidding. But obviously they should have some sort of organized sport to play. I think that's a really valuable thing to learn. Just learning how to work with people. I think that's a really easy way to let them explore that on their own. But I think that when you reduce the exposure to music and visual arts and things like that, then these students are not making those connections in their brain. They're still obviously developing. If you talk about specifically elementary school, they're developing a lot in their brains, and for coming from the psychological standpoint. But obviously that development continues on to your late 20s. So, I mean, my brain's still developing. I'm still a kid. But it's so important to exercise those parts of your brain. And if politicians can't see that and they're going to cut the school budgets like this, it's just a really, really horrible situation that these students are being forced into now, and I really hate it. But I think so. Yeah, that's what I have to say on that. I really don't like it at all. It's so important to have music, at least.
Yeah, you were saying also something about math.
Oh, yeah.
I'm intrigued.
Okay, so I think I mean, obviously math is, I think, one of the most valuable tools that humanity has ever come up with. It's literally behind every single part of your life. And whether or not you think about math every day, everyone says they hated math, right? Except for the scientists, I guess. Even me, I'm not, sitting here thinking about a lot of math, but really, I think where American education in math is failing is, and why we're always, whenever they report China being ahead in test scores or whatever, and Americans always being at the bottom when it comes to science and math, at least, and then at the bottom of everything else, is, I think, one of the key proponents of that is how we're teaching math. I think that if we can accelerate the students, we can accelerate the way students think about problems, math problems, and things like that, and this obviously extends further on into other disciplines than just math, is if we teach algebra earlier on. So when you can think about something, for instance, like x, like find x, right? That's always the joke, and then they just point at the x. But if you can get them to think of even just the math problem in an abstract way, right? We use variables. We just use letters to represent numbers in algebra. If you can get them to think of it that way, then that expands how they will think about the rest of their life, I think, honestly. If you can instill just thinking of things in an abstract way, I think that's a really valuable skill, and that will really help a lot of people out, especially if it's taught earlier, I think. But that's what I think about. That's the one thing I would change. If I could change one thing about how we teach math, it would be teach algebra earlier.
So a lot of the individual concepts that we use within algebra are actually taught at various levels. Like I have I had 5th grade students doing plotting points and making sure that they understand that. Now, I have also taught algebra at the high school level where students who don't know how to plot points aren't sure that it's X then Y.
I was one of those students.
A coordinate point. So a lot of the concepts are done. I think the thing that is the most difficult is that the way algebra is understood, especially by low-income area students, is that you can even have some level of mastery within a school year, but then you take some time off, like the 2 months of summer break, for instance. You come back, you've forgotten everything that you've learned up until then.
Oh yeah.
And in the way that people think about math in the real world, they don't understand that they're using variables every day. And so when you integrate them into the lexicon of algebra, they get lost or confused and don't understand it. And then the real thing that I think that you're talking about is math sense. So we are teaching skills without really teaching the logic of mathematics. So if we had a higher development of math sense within students, then anything that they do would be easier to manipulate. But it's very hard to teach curiosity, to teach ambition, and to teach things, higher abstract concepts like math sense. So when we have the idea of Common Core, it is pushing in that direction, and we have the idea that the U.S. is aligning more with the most high-functioning systems across the world, but it is very difficult in general to develop a system that can teach an abstract concept, especially when the only way to measure a student's progress is with a test.
Right.
So you're not teaching them math sense, you're teaching them how to recognize a given question and answer that formula of a question. So teach them an algorithm for a standardized question form as opposed to understanding an abstract concept, because there is a lot of work that is required, and students get further and further and further behind. If a student is going to get behind, they tend to get further behind than catching up at the elementary and middle school level. So when you get to high school and you're attempting to teach formally algebra, it gets exceedingly difficult. And you get repeaters and things like that. And then you get students who, if they fail 1 or 2 times, they'll just skip math in general. So
that's true.
Then we have super low performing students who can't be balanced out by students who are performing at the average or slightly above average areas. I would say that I would agree with the idea that we need to figure out a way to teach math sense, to teach understanding logic, and to really focus on getting students to understand how things work. At the same time, math has a very negative cultural discussion
in America, anyways.
And especially I'm focused, since we're talking about American schools. In America, so all the time on like the Disney Channel or any kids shows, math is accentuated as a difficult or challenging subject. There is a concept known as math paralysis or math fear, in which students, literally their brains will function at a staggered rate due to just it being the math subject. So even if they were able to, in general, understand a concept, because of that fear or paralysis with math in particular, it becomes much more difficult for that student to master and retain that skill over time. So I think in general we need, as a society, to push forward to have a positive cultural acknowledgement of math as a necessary and public good. And unfortunately, we have a system which has sought to punish academics, punish the idea of having knowledge, and if you know math, then you're an egghead, and you're actually an idiot at large because you don't have those common sense skills. So I think that part of understanding math logic and things like that is accentuating the positivity and the positive relationship of students with math in a general public pop culture way. I think that is a strategy that we haven't been able to really try or master at large, and we need to stop with the cheap jokes.
But I like calling people four eyes. That's funny. At least I can count how many eyes. Look, Ivan, what sort of course would you, if you could put one course into the general curriculum across America, what would you put in?
I would put in programming.
Programming, like computer sciencing.
Yeah, so
computer science,
either computer science or a calculator programming course, something that would teach students the language of computers.
Yeah.
Especially at the lower income level. I mean, they might have interaction with technology. For instance, many of my students have cell phones or other devices, but they have no friggin' clue how it works. So if we are to spark interest in technology, it's not just about playing, Fortnite. PUBG on your phones, Fortnite on your phones, or Flappy Bird, but we should build a development of technological understanding that is geared towards the 21st century, and not just using it, but how it functions and how you can be part of a 21st century economy that is built off of the use of these devices. So not just like, can I use the keyboard on my computer? That's for a lot of our national politicians, that's like, whoa, crazy. My 4-year-old knows how to touch an Apple, the iPhone, and you manipulate the screen. But that kid has no idea how the phone works. And I guarantee you the majority of school-age children that are using the device that's right in front of them have no idea how it works, or like what an operating system is, or what ones and zeros mean. Yeah, so, like the binary code. So I think that developing some sort of programming language skill as a class would help develop an understanding of how technology functions, and then lead into a greater amount of 21st century job-focused skills.
Right. I was, this is just a stupid anecdote, but I was talking to, a woman who just graduated from her undergrad, or was about to, I guess, at a party a couple weeks ago. And somehow it came up that I was getting my PhD in chemistry. And so I started explaining, and then we got into how I would, if I were to go into chemistry, I wanted to work with the chemistry of electronics and making materials that can be integrated into electronics. So I was basically explaining how her phone worked on just a mechanical level, like what RAM is, what a hard drive is, what a CPU and GPU are, and it fucking blew her mind. And this is a college level student. So I think that you're absolutely right. And I think to a certain extent there are some courses given in high schools right now for computer programming, although they might just be electives currently. So not everyone is forced to learn it. But I think
it's very limited in its scope, and it
might just be in private schools or something.
So either in private schools or super well funded public schools, like schools that Bill Gates personally donates to. What is it, the Brooklyn Science Charter or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's something like that.
So there are a few schools that do have this opportunity and ability. I know probably the high school that I graduated from has some level of this, but I remember when I was in school, we learned programming on our calculators. I mean,
oh, that's cool.
Our teacher gave us some basic steps, and then everything else after that, we were we would have different competitions of who could create the most useful program or the coolest game, really, or things cool. like that. And we were huge fucking nerds. But we had one guy who was brilliant at programming on the calculator, and was able to program a Heroes of Might and Magic, chess strategy type game with pieces that would have different powers and could move in different spaces. So it was a lot of really complex work. Other people designed clocks, and I would personally design programs to make my math homework easier. So I just had to.
That's awesome. Just type in a number.
Yeah, plug in whatever the numbers were, and I could load out it would show me my work in between. So if my teacher forced me to show my work, I could show every step in between.
That's awesome.
Without having to punch in individual numbers, because I just basically put in the formula, it would do it, and then the number of keystrokes that I had to do was cut down by magnitudes. So it's teaching programming is going to be, and how a computer program works as a general knowledge base is really important.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think if I could, it's currently pretty much just taught on a college level. But if I could go back to college, I would probably get a comp-sci degree.
Me too,
or maybe
actually
fail on my way going to get the comp-sci degree, but I would try. It's because right now I know some basic commands in Python because I've had to learn how to do that sort of thing by myself, but it's really nothing to the degree that a proficient programmer would be able to do. So.
And I'm not saying that this is
you need to teach a legion of hackers,
Perl and Python and C++ and QBasic, and all of these things within a school a thing. And I
Those
just named
a
bunch of terms that I know are there, but I know that there are ones that people use nowadays that are more accurate.
HTML5, I think. I don't know, 6?
In general, if we have that kind of course, we're reshaping our educational focus to something that is a 21st century based focus.
Yeah.
The skills that, the system that existed before was one third of people go to college, 1/3 of people go straight into the workforce, 1/3 of people, don't graduate or something like that. It's or go into the armed forces or some other service industry. There was a set way by which tracking worked in the old school system of education. We've been attempting to move education into the 21st century for years, and we go through so many different cycles of systems, and we try to stick with X system and Y system and Z system, and we have to flip the classroom, but no, we have to keep the classroom how it is. Now we have to focus on behavior or X, Y, and Z things in how that behavior is done. So students get super confused about what the system is or what the other thing is, but in general, we're not really understanding that as we move on, maybe our coursework needs to change. So instead of just math and reading and science, we need to teach something like programming, which is a language that's just as important. So if we're going to stop teaching cursive, maybe we can teach
Get that shit out of here. Fuck cursive, man.
It's a different language, but one that is super important to learn. And I think that we can refocus and retool an entire generation who is using devices and have no idea how they work, and teach them how, like, in the programming course. If you're going to use it
that much, better fucking know what you're doing, right?
Exactly. In the programming course, you learn how to program, how to do some basic programming commands, how a phone works. It would be like shop or like automotive for a computer.
Yeah, or, just literally another language. Like, I can speak very broken Spanish, but I could probably get by if I really needed to. So if you're ever put in a situation where you need to fix something through a line of code, then you would probably be able to figure it out if we implemented an efficient way and a very, a school-like thing that would work. So, but as you were saying, right, we need to do it now in order to see any effect in 10 years or so. So that's where our current political system as education is forever linked to our politics. is where our current political system and how America's been governed for centuries, for a very long time now, where we make very slow glacial movements in terms of our politics, right? We sort of get in a gridlock where nothing happens, and then things get cut, and then it gets changed, and it goes back and forth, right? That's generally a lot of how our politics work out.
The amount of gridlock that we experience in modern politics is actually unprecedented.
Oh, it's unprecedented.
In the time of, like, over the course of the history of the United States, like, there hasn't been this much gridlock since the Civil War. Basically.
I would say that education is a type of thing that we need to make an immediate action on. In our country,
and that's local politics, folks.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, and don't, Jesus Christ. But
I know nobody cares about local elections. Everybody only votes in presidential years.
Hey,
but your local elections determine what the school board says and what the state board of education says. So, like, your local elections are the ones that determine what students are learning. And then if you get things like super conservative religious people or super conservative nativistic people, then you can't teach racial focused subjects. So if you're in Texas, you can't teach Latinx people about their history, despite them being in that land as a people longer than non-Latinx people.
Right.
Minus Native American, First Nation people.
If we keep going on, we're both going to get pretty angry. And I think we reserve our anger for Overwatch, Ivan. I think that's what we should reserve our anger for. But I think that our educational system is due for a huge reform, but we won't get it anytime soon. And I think that again comes back to we've talked about it. You just brought it up. It's all about these local elections that really matter. If you really want to, see any sort of change in your life, those are the elections that matter. And whenever you say, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter because of the Electoral College," well, that's because it's the presidential vote and things like that. So it's like you can make a huge change in your local community, and that will make a huge change in the country. So I think that that's where we need to start. And it's this, our kids are the future, as everyone says, right? So there's nothing we can do about our own education currently, unless we just teach it to ourselves, but we can definitely change our children's education, or future children for us. We don't have kids.
Exactly.
I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but or if you wanted to keep talking. I just don't want to.
No, I'm all good, I think.
Okay, well, good. Thanks a lot for talking us through this, Ivan. It's really insightful to hear from an actual teacher. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Ivan, did you know that we end our podcast every single week in a song in a segment called Hungover Radio? This is where you, the listener or viewer, can send in your music or music requests. We'd like that it be a song that you wrote or played an instrument on, or maybe your friend wrote and wanted some free advertisement for yourself. It'll be played at the end of the podcast. But if no one can think of a song, I usually come up with a song. But today, Ivan came up with a song, perhaps feeling nostalgic in some way, shape, or form for Pokemon. Maybe not. I don't know why he thought of this.
I was feeling nostalgic for Pokemon.
Good. It's a fantastic game. Once Nintendo releases that, I think I'm done playing all other games. I'll just play that game. But until then, we're going to play the opening theme for Pokemon Red and Blue. Hope you guys enjoy. I'm Julien.
I'm Ivan. And remember, vote 1, 2, 3, or 4 to save that pig!